Hey, this is Jeff from Catch Analytics. I wanted to provide an update to the OBCOAP Power BI report that was built using 2020 data. This version has a most recent data dump, so from January of 2022, which covers most of 2021. We're going to get into details about where there are some gaps in the data. There's some pretty significant changes to the report, so this video is just intended to provide an overview of those changes. First, let's just take a look at the high-level data. So deliveries by year shows the slightly declining trend across the 5 years from 2016 through 2020, and then a fairly sharp drop from 2020 to 2021. This should not be taken as an indication that the real number of deliveries has fallen. Rather, it's an indication that data is missing in some instances. So if we take a look by site, we're going to see that for a number of facilities, the number of deliveries is down pretty sharply. So 96%, 348 to 12, 78 and 77%, 3,300 to 733, 2,000 to 448, etc. That's because the data is not complete. So if we then look at the 2 years by quarter, 20 and 2021, you're going to see a lot of sites either didn't have Q4 or Q3 data, or in some instances even much 2021 data at all. So a lot of it numbers are showing to be relatively flat on a year-over-year basis, so flat or even up in some cases, but then Q4 for a number of sites is not complete. So just bear in mind that when we're looking at year-over-year numbers from 20 to 21, that it's not because we're really seeing a decline in births. Now let's jump in and look at some of the changes to the report. The navigation page looks very similar. One of the key changes, however, is that I've added a whole new pane of filters, including IVF pregnancy, filters by commercial payer or not, government payer or not, and then a Medicaid payer or not. We also have length of time from complete dilation to delivery greater than 3 hours or greater than 4 hours. That was a request from Dr. Angela Chen. And then, as before, the ability to select the NTSB population or other populations. I simplified the navigation into pages, so there are now 3 sections where I'm looking at demographics and KPI changes, KPIs over time, and the drill down at the facility level. The trend analysis is very, very similar to the previous report. There's one really significant change where I've brought in Robson data, so we can look at the Robson classification system by all of these metrics. Then the benchmarking section is essentially identical to what was there before. Let's go take a look at the demographic and KPI changes. So I wanted just to be able to understand what this population looked like from a demographic perspective. And so we have 6 key metrics over here. Their selection is, there was some thought into this, but this could be quite flexible. We have the mothers by hospital. So what this is the deliveries where the mother record is true, and that means we're not counting, say, twins or triplets as separate deliveries. So this is just the number of mothers who have delivered. Then we have the percentage by Robson classification, so we're using the 10 count here instead of the 12 count. And then we have the demographic variables: race, median income ratio, BMI, percentage without high school, by age bucket, and by EIG quintile, which looks at zip codes and classifies them from distressed, at-risk, mid-tier to comfortable and prosperous. This is super interesting just to spend time with and look at the differences in the populations. So if we select whites, all of this data will change to reflect the difference between the white population and the overall population. But we can see that whites are more predominant in the 100 to 125. So this real middle tier, that probably relates to how the fact that whites are 52% of the population. More interesting changes start to jump out when we select subpopulations. So looking at the Asian population, there are big changes here. One is that the population really skews wealthy, older, more educated, and comfortable and prosperous, as well as from a BMI perspective, either normal or underweight. That's contrasted with other populations. So were we to select blacks, you would see real changes here in these metrics. So median income is lower, BMI is higher, percentage without high school is also higher, etc. And then, as physicians know, these demographic measures can be seen in a number of real medical metrics, such as percentage of cesareans, postpartum hemorrhage, and a number of other metrics. I really wondered about KPI changes. So how did different KPIs change from a year-over-year perspective, as well as from the beginning of the data set in 2016 through the end of the data set in 2021. So on this scatter plot on the right side here, we have all the different key metrics, which are listed right here, and then the changes on a year-over-year basis along the x-axis, so the change from 20 to 21, and then the change from 16 to 21 on the y-axis. So what jumps out here is postpartum hemorrhage, as having gone up almost 5 points from 16 to 21, and almost a whole point from 20 to 21. So when we select this graph on the lower right side will activate, and we'll see that it went from 3.4% up to 8.3%. So there's that 5% change. We can select a different metric, so cesarean percentage had a pretty significant increase of 0.7% from 30 to 30.7, and severe maternal morbidity, a really steady increase over the 6 years within this data set, doubling from 1% to 2.1%. Switching metrics, we're going to see maternal complications. And the ones that jumped out to me were pre-pregnancy mental health, took a real jump, 3 points on a year-over-year basis, 6 points on a 5-year basis. When we select that, we're going to see this increase from 9% to 15.1%. One of the cool things that's built into this is the ability to, from here, drill through. So if I right-click on pre-pregnancy mental health, I'm going to drill through to the facility change view. And this will bring that metric with us. So we have pre-pregnancy mental health. And then we can see by hospital which hospitals have the biggest change in pre-pregnancy mental health. So 111 stands out with a big 20% increase year over year. It's when we select that, we're going to see this big jump, and that really strong increase makes me think that it could well be a change in the way this was measured, as opposed to a change in the absolute value without any methodology changes. But it's definitely worth exploring more. We can certainly look at other facilities. So 110, we see this increase from 19 out through 2021, and a pretty big jump from 14.4% to 21.1%. I really like this view because it, I think, will allow users to really drill in and understand where they could be at risk. And one way to do that would be to go back to the navigation pane and select a single facility. So if you are interested in what's going on with your own facility, let's go in and we'll select, let's say, 135. And then when we come to the KPIs over time, what we're looking at is just for that one facility. So if you are in a facility, if you're a doctor working in a facility or an administrator, you can go through and see those changes, and then again be able to drill in. Actually, now that we select one facility, the drill through doesn't really mean all that much, but you can see where the metrics really change for your hospital, and then this will serve as a launching point for deeper analysis. So here, cesarean jumped by a whole point. Definitely something worth looking at. If we jump into the understanding delivery trends view, this is exactly the same as it was in the first version, in last year's version, but there's one exception. And so one of the most interesting things that I did last year was to do a deep dive on the Robson classification system for cesarean section. And I thought that there was a ton that was worth exploring, not just for cesarean rate. So here we have the cesarean percentage rate, and this is how Robson is typically used. But also, I thought there was just a ton to see if we started to look at other metrics. So we can look at 3 to 4 degree laceration and see where the real risk is, and we see a lot of this risk is coming in the NTSV population as well as in the the induced population. I think there's a lot to learn here, and so I thought it was worth using this real estate. I do recognize, however, that looking at these metrics by practice type is also worthwhile, and so we have the ability to jump from the Robson view to the practice type view. And so I've kept that old feature. I've also kept the ability to look at demographic, where we're looking at BMI or age bucket, or switch to socioeconomic and look at median income ratio or percentage without high school. And that applies for all of these different pages: maternal complications, delivery, postpartum complications, medications, newborn outcomes, and newborn trauma. The benchmarking view is, I think, virtually unchanged to what it was before. Here we have just one hospital. Let's go back and select the entire range of hospitals. Okay, so then when we go back to the benchmarking page, now we're going to see all these hospitals here. 135 is selected. We can easily pick another hospital and look at, this is postpartum hemorrhage. We can look at cesarean percentage here and see that change. So this is very similar. We have the facility scorecard where we have a number of different metrics and whether these numbers are above and below the mean. We can really manage very closely the different demographic characteristics of the population. Then we have scorecards for admitting provider and delivery provider. And I think this is really really useful when we go and look at the facility or the hospital level, which can be accomplished right here. And then finally, the scatter plot, which I think is one of the most valuable ways of looking at data. So here we have admitting provider, the scatter plot, and then we have delivery provider. Let's go and choose, we have cesarean percentage, and then let's look at 3 to 4 degree laceration. So let's look at episiotomy instead. And then all this data is going to change to reflect that, which I think is really, really cool. So there's a lot to look at and a lot to learn here. Again, coming back to the demographics and KPI page, I think it's one of the simplest pages, but also one of the most revealing. So I hope this has been useful. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.